said he first off specified that most of his possessions are going to come from spot up and that he's a good spot up player. And then this sub bullet point down here is that even though 32 of his 41 catch and shoots are guarded, he's still 1.5 points per game, 91st percentile. So he has, and then I'm guessing that this bullet point came from Jason looking and seeing what a good 3-point shooter he is, what a good 3-point shooter he is guarded, and watching some film and seeing that he has very deep range. He's willing to launch it from significantly behind the 3-point line. So that's definitely something where you can put a little bit of elaboration on there, and if you notice that he's taking shots from like where Steph Curry would take shots, that's something that wants to be noted for
and
sure.
Also here's coaches. Jason's recommendation, got all the way up in his face, or like long closeout. Like closeout means, like long closeout means you don't want him or her to shoot threes. Whereas short closeout is, if he stands like behind the 3-point line, just let him shoot.
Yeah. So if you guys are I'm sure this will be different for each one of you guys, but for those of you that are like somewhat familiar with like the basketball terminology, like give this guy a long closeout, that's something that you definitely should be including when you find stats to warrant that kind of analysis, like that we need to give him a long closeout. If you don't know exactly what that means, or you don't feel super comfortable with giving those type of recommendations, then I would say just really try and look for the stats that are jumping out to you, stuff that looks like it's especially important, and then when you deliver it to us, when we put it into the team reports,
we can transcribe.
Yeah, we'll be able to add that sort of like basketball speak for the coaches
you can
to help
just
translate it.
Like all the way up in his face or something like that.
Yeah. So whatever you want to do, but I think having a little bit of elaboration, show why you included that stat. Don't just throw random numbers up on the board. If it's something that's like obvious why it's up there, then you don't always need elaboration. But in general, I think it's good to have a little bit of explanation. And like Frank said, oftentimes the best way to format it is have like an argument and then statistics to support that argument. And generally, when you find it, it'll be you find the statistics and it helps you determine what that argument's going to be, right? You're going to see certain things about the player, and it'll help you be able to make recommendations, or at the very least, have an argument saying he's really, really good at this, or he's terrible doing this, so make him do that. Certain things like that.
Just show him like what a team scout looks like from what they.
Yeah, I think that'd probably be it. So what he's pulling up right here is one of the random bogus, huh? That's what we're under? Okay. So this is what he's going to pull up is one of our team scouts, the final ones that we show to the coaches. This is just kind of to give you guys an idea of, just pick one of the Word docs, so go hold them in, or whichever. Yeah, so this will give you an idea of what we're taking your guys' material and turning it into to give to the coaches. So I think after this meeting, we'll send out in the Slack, the things we're going to be sending out are this video for the people that aren't here to refer to. We'll be sending out the play-by-play the breakdown that Jason had pulled up to help you guys with the sort of step-by-step, and we'll try and add a little bit of more material for that so that you guys have a better idea of like where certain cutoffs are and stuff for that to help you decide when stats are worthwhile or not. I would say we won't always be able to give you every single one of those. It'll just come with experience, you guys figuring out what outliers are, and outliers are like the most important things that you want to be noting. So this is what our final player scouts look like. So you saw the last one, there's a whole bunch of bullet points, more elaboration. We want that out of you guys, and generally in the final team scouts, we're going to be condensing it. But still, it's going to contain like certain information. So for Giovanni De Nicolau, he had a super high points per possession on dribble jumpers. As you'll notice, like we didn't include the percentile that he was ranked in that one because it'll be obvious. When we're putting these together, we're going to have in mind that we're giving this to the coaches who already have a really strong context of basketball and what's good, what stats are good, like the points per possession are high, that sort of thing. So we didn't include that, but only 0.6 0.76 points per possession catch to shoot, of which 67% are threes. We also noticed in this guy, if you guys know what a runner is, like a floater coming down the lane, that sort of thing, is for most people not a super, super highly used shot. So for this guy, 15% of his half-court shots is pretty high, and he scored 1 point per possession on that, which, if you'll notice, we said he scored his 1 point per possession on runners, which versus his 0.75 points per possession total on half-court shots. That kind of just provides some context in that he's really, really good with his runner relative to when he's shooting at different parts of the court. And then if you'll notice, like we said, the bar at the bottom always includes half-court three-point rate, free throw percentage, assist to turnover. The other ones that I chose for this guy were that he's only a 28% three-point shooter, which is god-awful. If you guys are looking at three-point percentages, generally a pretty average to decent three-point percentage is like 33 to 38%. If they're 40% and above, that's like really, really good. And if they're below 30%, that's just atrocious. So just include that three-point percentage. 2 steals per game is really high. That's kind of a generalization about what a good defender he is. And then the 0.714 points per possession in spot up, again, is kind of showing the same thing as the three-point percentage, is that in where he's spotting up, catching, and shooting, he's not particularly that good. And then, like we noted right here, the transition, I had 2 different, transition at 1.125 points per possession is his best play type. So taking that points per possession and comparing it to his other play types, that's where he stands out the most. And when I saw that, I went and looked at his position, or all of his, I watched some film on his transition game, saw that he was leaking out quickly. That's how he was getting a lot of his points, as he was on the defensive end, and then as soon as the shot went up, starting to run down the court, catching the ball, and trying to get ahead of the defense to score. So just that's a little like specification on how he's doing that in transition. And then he's also a creator in transition, with 33% assist rate in transition is very high. And then his overall assist per game is pretty solid at 3.4. So that's showing that like in transition, he's often going to be a ball handler, and one, he can score, but he can also distribute very well in transition. Those, if you'll notice, those are like, I had when originally in Giovanni's, his like the full scout had a lot more material in it. And again, this is what we take when we condense it all down for the coaches. So I would say when you guys are putting together yours, try, if it's better to have too much information, and just, if you guys have too much information, that just makes it a little bit more work for Frank and I to go through that and figure it out, go through that and figure out which ones are the most important. But it's definitely better to have too much information than not enough. If there's something that you think might be noteworthy, but you're not 100% sure, it's probably best just to include it. And then if you find other stuff later that like is definitely should be on there, and all of a sudden you don't feel like you have a lot of room for the other stuff you weren't sure about, then you can remove that. Or if you can't find stuff that you're like, oh, this definitely needs to be included, then keep something that you were, maybe this should go in there, maybe it shouldn't, if that makes sense.
Don't make us go back and find more information. We just want to be able to look at your thing without having to watch more film.
Yeah, so there was, last year, there was like one guy who, we won't name drop, but there was like one guy who, when he would turn in his player reports, it would be like 3 bullet points, and it was like his 3-point percentage, and it would be like how many assists he had. And it's like, all right, what's even the point of us doing this if you're just going to give us these basic stats that the coaches already know? So please, please, please don't do that, because when he was doing that and turning it into us, then those of us who were responsible for the team scouts essentially just had to go back and completely redo his scout on our own. So yeah, that's that. And if you're ever doing these and you feel like you're having trouble finding stuff, or you're not sure what to do with it, like, you guys should definitely never hesitate to reach out to one of us. I can't promise that like I personally will always be free, or Frank will always be free, but one of us will be able to come and help you guys out, or at the very least like offer you some tips on how to improve and stuff like that. So don't be afraid to reach out to us and ask us if you have any questions while you're doing these things. Yes.
For like freshmen, will it be like hard to like scout for them since they don't have? Is it like from high school?
Oh yeah, we
didn't include any
You
freshmen.
didn't include?
Yes.
Yeah. So like the first I think like 4 or 5 games we won't scout the freshmen. We're only gonna assign you guys the teamer scouts are just gonna be shorter. They're only gonna include those that have already played a year in college, and then once we get a big enough sample size, then we'll start to include the freshmen. And once it's past 5 or 6 games, then everyone will have 5 or 6 games to look at, and we'll be using that for everyone. All right.
I was just kind of looking at this is the girl who's really good for Texas A&M. Really played first game of the year.
Yeah, I think Jen. I'm pretty sure this is one of yours for Texas A&M.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Could you pull up the template?
Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm on both men's and women's, so I have something.
Yeah, so one other thing I want to point out is the difference between when you scout guards versus scout bigs. So there are some specific points when you scout, like when you're doing scouting reports on guards. Say, some of the points that you want to emphasize is like their spot up, or in pick and roll as a ball handler. Like how does he attack the rim, or does he kind of drive right or drive left, or does he like shoot or attack the rim and stuff like that?
Especially for point guards, that's definitely one. Pick and roll is a play type that's used. Almost every single team uses that a super high proportion of the time. So for almost every like ball handling guard, you're gonna have pick and roll stats, and that's one basic way. One thing that you should always look at is finding out how they play out of pick and roll, because a lot of players have a lot of different tendencies out of pick and roll, so that also makes it more interesting for us. Oftentimes you'll be able to notice that a player, when he comes off the pick and roll, is really trying to like get downhill and get straight to the basket, try and score. Other certain players will be coming off looking to pull up for a mid-range jump shot, and other ones will be coming off the pick and roll purely looking to like distribute to the roll man. Some will look to purely distribute to shooters on the outside. So those are certain things, and Synergy also gives you a really good breakdown of that.
Yeah, and for bigs, you will want to focus on